Good morning to all, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Stephen Galliano. I'm the Chief Customer Officer for Workplace Options, and it's my pleasure today to act as your moderator, your facilitator. This is the UK version of a series of webinars we've been running around the world, focusing very much on the pandemic, the effects the pandemic have had on employees, managers, organizations generally. And we'll be doing this today with a number of panelists, and it's my great pleasure to introduce the panelists today. And now let me start, first of all, by introducing Gail Weeks. Gail is the global EAP and the Health and Wellbeing Program, the Global Health and Wellbeing Program Manager for Nokia. And Nokia, of course, is a global telecoms company with about 80,000 employees in around 130 or so locations around the world. And Gail's job really is to manage all of the wellness programs that are focused on making sure that Nokia employees have a good day, that all of the support services that they require are easily available to all, and that they all have the professional levels of care and support to those for those employees. I'm also joined. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you.
I'm also joined by Mark Jenkins. Mark's the business development manager for Willis Towers Watson. Willis Towers Watson is as we all know, a global broking and solutions company with a huge spread, about 50,000 or so employees around the world in about 120, 130 countries, something like that, Mark, I think. And Mark, your role is really to lead the sales and marketing of EAP and well-being programs in the UK. And Mark is a trained physiotherapist, and I also happen to know that he's served as an officer in the army for about 12 years. So thanks for your service, Mark, and welcome. And the other individual I have with me is Andrew Maher. Andrew is the Director of Clinical Services for the EMEA region for Workplace Options. And Andrew's role is to lead the team of clinical managers across Workplace Options service centers and offices around Europe and Dublin and London, Paris, Belgium, Portugal. And I think as part of that job, Andrew, you probably handle maybe 500 or so calls every day, clinical calls coming in from the region, but also from other parts of the world. So I think Andrew's got a pretty good insight and pretty good visibility into the impact that the pandemic has had on employees, on managers, organizations. And I believe, Andrew, that the area that you like specializing in is in the area of crisis and trauma work. So I think hopefully you'll find Andrew's clinical insights particularly interesting and eye-opening today. Welcome, Andrew, as well. Let me just talk about the format of the webinar, because I think it's important that we all know what's going to happen. And it's kind of an informal question and answer chat. Some people might call it a fireside chat. So I'll be asking questions of the three panelists, and there'll be no doubt follow-up questions. We want it to be fairly kind of relaxed as well, but illuminating at the same time. After each general question, we'd like to run a poll to ask you, the audience, a simple question, and we'll do a little short survey, and that I think might give us also something to talk about as well. We're going to try and keep to time. It's my job as moderator and timekeeper to try and do this. And the objective is to try and round up the questions by about 1/4 to the hour. And then at that point, we will look at questions that you yourself will have hopefully posted in the questions section of the GoTo site that you're in at the moment. You'll find that section on the right of your screens, I believe. And I will be keeping an eye on it, or some of our support team will, and they'll remind me to read those questions right at the end. And hopefully we'll stick to the sort of 1 hour limit that we've set aside. Just some housekeeping, just to remind myself, you're all currently muted, I believe, and also your videos are off. Again, to remind you that there is a question section on the GoTo platform. Feel free to use this at any time. If anything comes up that you really want to share, then please do so in the questions section as well. So without further ado, let's move into the dialogue. I think where I'd like to get started with is the issue of fatigue. So this webinar is about VUCA. It's about the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and the ambiguity that we have all faced over the last 15 months. And I think most of us have probably had enough of that to last a lifetime, I suspect. One of the impacts, of course, of all of this is how it's shaped our lives, both at work, but also within our homes and our lifestyles. And some of these changes arguably will be permanent ones, and some will not. One area that I think this level of VUCA-ness has had an impact that it's had is in the area of fatigue. This has been much discussed in amongst clinicians and mental health experts in the last 4 or 5 months. And we want to use fatigue not just in the physical sense, and we don't want to focus on the post-viral fatigue syndrome, which we know will take 3 to 3, 4, 5 weeks for some people to recover post-infection, as I can attest to, having been infected at Christmas time. We want to focus really on the sense of fatigue that we are seeing in people that are related really to their lifestyle. And we're talking about not just the physical element, but very much the emotional one. So that's really my first question to the panel. And I'm going to start with Andrew to get us going on this discussion. And Andrew, just share some of your kind of insights on this issue of fatigue as you work with your clinical leadership team around Europe.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I mean, yeah, definitely fatigue is a big part of the struggle at the moment. I suppose as we're pivoting back from a fear-based view, where we've all endured kind of survival mode for a period of months, there inevitably will be some emotional reactions to that pivot back. We all have in some way experienced what I call collective trauma of the pandemic. However, the key is we all are experiencing that in our own way, and therefore have different needs associated then with recovery that need to be identified. Pandemic fatigue, as you alluded to there, is sort of this sense of that we're running on empty. Emotional and psychological trauma can be present because our sense of security has kind of been shattered. We're feeling a little bit helpless in this VUCA world. Psychological trauma then can leave us struggling with upsetting emotions, memories, and an anxiety that won't go away, leaving us feeling a little bit numb or disconnected. So these are some of the impacts that we're experiencing. In general, traumatic experiences often involve that kind of threat to life or safety, but any situation that leaves us feeling overwhelmed can leave us feeling a bit traumatized. So in simple terms for me, nearly the more frightened and helpless we're feeling, the more likely we are to probably be experiencing a little bit of trauma. With this in mind, bringing it back to the clinical team and the presentations that we're experiencing, currently when we're taking calls from around the European region and around the globe, we're definitely experiencing a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. However, complicated grief is probably something that's huge, with a lot of people not being able to attend funerals, having lost loved ones. Loss in general on all different levels has been huge, and relationship difficulties. And even as we move towards risk, we've noticed an increase in domestic violence and some suicidal ideation. But also, I suppose, as we're transitioning back, and over the past couple of weeks, we've experienced kind of stagnation or a kind of a pandemic inertia, where people, their life events have been put on hold, marriages, etc., birthday parties, and even careers feel like they've been put on hold. And that's leaving a lot of people stuck, demotivated, and seeking some mental health supports. So they're the kind of things that we're finding at the moment, Stephen.
Andrew, very briefly on what you've said, because there's talk that initially in the first part of the pandemic, well, the first 3 or 4 months of the pandemic, people felt quite sort of released and quite different about working from home and all of the positive things that came with it. But it seems as if, is it your observation generally that people have now got to a point of inertia, I think you called it?
Yeah, definitely. At the start of the pandemic, Stephen, we all found new hobbies. We all found new things to do. We all found the excitement nearly of working from home. I myself picked up a guitar, stuck with it for 3 months. I haven't gone back near it since. But it's that kind of, it brought us new opportunities. But those coping mechanisms, I think, have kind of dissipated a bit. And people are questioning their future because they're looking back at this whole year and going, it does feel like everything has been on hold, and I have felt, that I am stuck, and where am I going to next? So that's feeding into all this anxiety and stress.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Gail, turning to you, I guess one of the things that kind of Andrew was hinting at was that in the long term, there's an impact on people in the workplace, on their productivity, on their performance. And that productivity kind of is likely to drop over time as a result of it. But I know that you guys in Nokia, with all of your many employees around the world, that you've been trying to address this issue of exhaustion, of resilience in some of the work that you've been doing. So tell us about that.
Yeah, and just on that point about sort of understanding how everybody was coping, we actually did a number of pulse surveys throughout last year just to get an idea on how employees were coping with the disruption brought about by the pandemic and working from home, which I think at that point we all thought wasn't actually going to be quite as long term as it turned out to be. But the surveys that we did showed us that the majority of the employees, over half in fact, were coping well, and about a third sort of said that they were getting by. The number of people that actually said they were struggling was actually very low, and it was also clear from the fact that productivity stayed strong. It wasn't really impacted negatively. But with that said, we know that many people have been feeling the effects of living under pandemic restrictions, mentally and physically. And because of that, we actually chose the topic of fatigue for the theme of our World Safety Day on April 28th, so just a few weeks ago. And we created a program of events that employees could engage with virtually. It's very different to our normal World Safety Days, but we wanted to kind of bring the topic forward and have a discussion about it. Because the view is that, the more we understand about fatigue, the easier the signals are to recognize and the earlier we can intervene and prevent people reaching that burnout stage. So we want to ensure that people have access to the support available, like the EAP, which we call the personal support service in Nokia. And we want them to do that much earlier before they reach their limit. So our sessions have been focusing on giving a better understanding of what fatigue is, the impact that has on our ability to perform, and how it actually plays out at work, so in the job you do. So what am I looking for in terms of, you know, whether or not I'm experiencing fatigue? Yes, of course, it can be because of an underlying, you know, symptom of a medical condition, but there's loads of lifestyle factors that can play a role. So, you know, sleep, diet, exercise, how work is managed, the stress, you know, how stressful the work environment is. So we probably put more of a focus on that. So we talk about the role that everyone has to play when it comes to reducing the risk of fatigue, and to really encourage people to intervene early if they suspect a problem, whether you're a leader, a manager, or a colleague. And then one last part on that is that, you know, we, of course, taking responsibility of our well-being is down to each one of us. And, you know, we encourage everybody and empower everybody to make it their priority. So thinking about making your well-being your non-negotiable. So what are those things that you won't sacrifice because you know it's, you know, what you need to do to make sure you can perform and stay well. So getting people to think about defining their non-negotiables to find that balance that works for them. Because I think if we learned anything last year, it was that everybody's very different. Everybody has totally different circumstances that they're living in, different coping mechanisms. So we don't want to be pushing a one-size-fits-all approach to everybody, but this whole thing about empowering people to define what works best for them and supporting them to do that. So that's where we go.
Yeah, I've often heard on the subject of fatigue, I often said the other side of fatigue is energy, and energy that people have and how they build their energy to be able to kind of drive them and to be able to be more productive and to be happier and have a heightened sense of well-being. How is Nokia keeping this message going to, you know, all the work that you've done there? How do you go about reminding people of the importance of managing this fatigue?
Yeah, so one of the things that we kicked off in March actually this year with Workplace Options, we kicked off a mental health training series, and we sort of termed it as, you know, take the first step, start the conversation. And they are a whole range of things, from, you know, whether that's resilience, coping with change, which everybody's coping with some sort of change, but, you know, healthy mind toolkit. But then things about healthy movement, and, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, the whole importance of rest and recovery. So planning that into your day. And I think, you know, it's that idea that, you know, we used to have a commute, you know, at the start and end of our day, and that's gone for most of us now. So rather than just squeezing in another couple of meetings, take that time to kind of, you know, increase your energy, what your energy gains, getting people to think about that. What do they need to do to make sure that they have enough energy to get them through the day, whether that's focus work or doing a presentation or, you know, just taking time out for lunch. So we just keep that drumbeat going through trainings, through Yammer posts, and then create sort of packages that our teams on the country level can then share and make it more relevant and engaging for their own employees, their own audience.
That's interesting, Gail. Thanks for that. Mark, this whole area kind of makes me think that it used to be all about EAPs, and then people started talking about well-being or wellness and broadening the programs. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective at that level, consulting as you do with as many.
Sorry, my answer machine's just gone off in the background. You can probably hear it, and that just illustrates the stresses and strains of working from home. At the moment, I'm about to talk. It comes on. I could have muted it any other time. I know it comes on, but
we're all in a similar situation. Actually, don't worry about it, because I had the postman knocking at my window here. It's about 3 minutes ago, and nobody heard it. I don't think so.
Exactly. I think I'll go off again in a minute.
So,
Listen,
Mark, yeah, has there been any shift in how organizations are viewing the shift to well-being? You know, have the buying habits changed? You know, what the demands for them for programs are?
I think, first of all, that's going to beep in the background. So maybe if you come back to me in 2 seconds, I'll go and turn it off. If you carry on amongst it, otherwise you're going to hear a beeping throughout the whole thing, aren't you? Oh, no, it's about to stop.
Okay, good.
Let's try it later. There we go. Oh, dear. So, yeah, so look, thank you for having me, Stephen. That's a great introduction, isn't it? Yes, the buying habits have changed hugely in the time we've been talking about this pandemic. We've had a real driving up the agenda of the conversation about well-being. Used to be a tough one to have, but now it's much more high up in the C-suite level. And in our emerging trends in healthcare survey in March, which we came out, we had our 65% of respondents said that well-being was a direct leadership responsibility. And that was out of 213 participants. So you can see how that well-being is driven to the top of the agenda. There has been a shift towards different products and how we want to look at different types of services. But I think that it remains that COVID-19 and mental health is definitely going to be the main concern. That was 9 out of 10 respondents on that survey said it's the main concern, as well as communicating what benefits people do have. So it's great to see that conversation has been driven to the top of the agenda, but it's still going to be very much focused on mental health going forward.
I guess there's no surprises there, given the amount of research and data that's coming out about the increase in the prevalence of mental health issues and how the pandemic has cascaded that into the media, and also how the prevalence rates themselves appear to have increased. You know, we used to talk about 25 or 30% of people. Now we're talking about 40% of people, even higher. So that's not surprising, and I guess it's also quite a good development. Well, almost a positive impact of the pandemic. You know, that organizations are more determined now, it seems, to do something more about it.
Yeah, certainly it's a much easier conversation to have with clients now, and it's the decisions are being made quicker and at a higher level, which is great to see. Okay,
great. I mean, we have a poll coming up now. CM just reminded me. Thanks, CM. And this is a very simple question, and you have a few seconds in which to answer the question that's appearing in front of your screen. Please feel free to participate in this, and we're looking at whether your organization is taking broader well-being services, you know, more seriously because of COVID. So we're asking a very specific question now, and we'll wait a few seconds, and then we'll get some kind of result very quickly. Okay, the poll is now finished, and 93% of you believe that the COVID has made us think more seriously about broader well-being services. That's interesting, Mark, don't you think? Is Mark there? I couldn't see him.
Yes, I'm back here. I was just unplugging the phone to make sure that didn't happen again.
Mark, thinking about the results of the poll, that I thought it was quite interesting that 93% of the participants' companies have thought more seriously about broader well-being services as a result.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a bit like the digital transformation talk about what's been the biggest driver in your firm's digital transformation. It's not been the digital transformation team, it's been COVID itself. So I'm sure it's the same with well-being. The biggest driver in bringing that to the agenda has been COVID itself, and bringing that to front and forward to people in decision-making positions.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's move on to a different question this time. I want to just reference the recent BBC survey of the top 50 UK companies, and where they found that nearly 90% of the companies surveyed indicated that they would be allowing employees in the future to work on a kind of a hybrid basis, partly from home and partly in the office. And working from home seems to have become the norm, I think, during COVID. Many have loved it. Many loved it at the start. Maybe they don't love it so much now. Some never loved it, but they had to do it. I think what's clear is that companies have changed the way that they think and the way that they function, and they've had to think about how managers manage. And I think probably the jury is still out on how work-life balance can be managed in this during this process. So I'd like to get Gail to get us started on this one. Gail, what from your perspective, from Nokia's perspective, what have been the main challenges faced with working from home, and maybe even thinking about the future hybrid patterns?
Yeah, it's been quite interesting actually. I think the majority of our employees adapted really well to working from home last year, and we saw that from those pulse surveys that we did, and they continue to do so this year. And as a global organization where we've got teams who are spread across the globe collaborating with each other virtually, I think there's always been that flexibility at Nokia to work from home and in that virtual mode anyway, so it wasn't as much of a shock as maybe it was for some other companies. We had everything in place to make that shift very, very quickly. Again, we saw that productivity wasn't impacted. So of course what that means now is that the move towards this more hybrid working model in the future is certainly being explored. Generally there was sort of I suppose maybe more of an expectation that people would be in the office on certain days, or every day or a few days a week, and now that flexibility is going to be increased more and more. And I think employees are looking for that extra flexibility to work from home more days a week. Lots of people certainly don't. I put myself in this camp. We don't miss that daily commute. So it's giving people the choice in the future, and looking at how will we use the office space in the future. It'll be more around meetings and collaboration rather than sort of people sitting at the same desk all the time. But we also know that there's, I think you just mentioned it, lots of employees also prefer being in an office because their home environment is just not suitable for work, or they live alone. They miss, yeah, we're all going, yes, I miss having that connection, with people every day. We've all been sort of living in these bubbles, and whether it's dogs, kids, answer phones, anything is going to disrupt that. But I think what people have struggled with most is, well, what we've heard anyway, is putting in place the boundaries between home and work life. So not having that proper cut-off time to stop working and totally disconnect. And I said it just a minute ago that we used to have a commute to and from work, which would give us that time to prepare for the day ahead or sort of decompress after a busy day. But it really gave us a clear boundary and a way to transition between the two. But with that gone, I think many people have ended up sort of feeling that they're in this 24/7 working mode, always being online, always being visible. So your green light on in Teams. So in our well-being sessions, we've discussed that a lot, and setting those boundaries, replacing your commute with something else, whether that's getting up and going for a walk in the morning or listening to a podcast, but just not skipping that time altogether and replacing it with another work meeting. And as I said, we're really emphasizing the importance of sort of building short periods of rest and recovery into your day. We don't have like our colleagues going, hey, do you want to go for a coffee or some lunch? And I think we tend to become even more sedentary, just thinking, well, I have to be here just in case that call comes in. I'm expected to be at my desk. So I think it's, again, always this thing about empowering people, but also us becoming more disciplined in doing that and encouraging each other to do it. So one of the programs that we have at Nokia is it's called the Good Day at Work program, and we've had some workshops, and they're all about just bringing teams together to talk about setting boundaries, managing expectations, providing a platform where everybody can just take an active role in influencing the way in which their team operates on a daily basis. And it just gives people an opportunity to talk about sort of more well-being type things in a structured, actionable way. So the hybrid model is not just about having a good digital experience. So yes, I think we all know about, you know, being able to connect, your Wi-Fi works and all that, but having the tools and the technologies to do your job, but also how we act and how we behave and know how we support each other to work well together remotely. And just really, one of the biggest tasks for us is to create that sense despite not being in the office. And I think it'll start to develop over time, but that's probably one of our biggest challenges, you know, the Nokia community. How do we make sure that stays strong?
Sure, absolutely. Mark, all this talk about virtual working, virtual services, has this kind of, have your clients changed in the way they think about what they want to purchase, what services they need, given the increasing virtual reality that we're all living in?
Certainly, Stephen. And I, for one, certainly missed the office, and I would be in the office today to do this call if I could have been. I thought I'd covered all bases coming to my mother-in-law's to get better broadband, but I didn't spot the answer machine in the corner of the room. But so apologies for that one there. Hopefully it won't go off again now I've unplugged it. There's certainly be a more urgent and speedy decision making around what clients are purchasing and what we've heard from. Again, before it was a longer conversation, perhaps, and maybe the can got kicked down the road a bit, but we're now seeing clients reach out, and when we engage with them and move very quickly, flash the bang, so to speak, to get something in place. So sometimes when they've had an incident or so it's highlighted the gaps in their welfare and wellbeing provision they've got. So that's great to see, and especially with EAP and the WPO offering as well. But I think in terms of what's available to employees, communication is really key on that. How do you communicate in this new hybrid environment? What's available? How can people access solutions? I think I heard a statistic that's often banded around at our work, around 20% of payroll being spent on benefits, but only 1% of that on the communication to employees about what's available and what they can get. So really to try and up that, and of course in the hybrid working environment, that's going to have to be done digitally and communicated well, and harder to do when you're not physically in the office. But in terms of what clients are looking at, again, at the risk of sounding like Les Dennis from Family Fortunes, if you remember that program, our survey said that telehealth and apps and those sort of digital mediums, 9 out of 10 people said they're only going to increase and get more and more traction and more interest over the years to come. That came off the back of our Emerging Trends Healthcare survey again. And again, so we're going to have to get used to doing things digitally, get used to providing these solutions online or remotely. But to give you an example of how those can work really well, we get a lot of InsurTech and health tech presentations from different companies. And some of the most interesting ones, for example, would be virtual reality smoking cessation, which blew my mind anyway. We know that on a headset to put yourself in a situation in a pub where do you not, or do you smoke or not smoke? Yeah, you have to want to quit in the first place to make the difference. But this is the kind of progress people are looking at to provide these solutions digitally. Online exercise, of course, Peloton, those sort of bikes. We heard of Wall Street banks providing Peloton bikes, which are not cheap, so that's a punchy benefit. But it's, you know, showing you how you can really reach out to clients at home and employees at home and provide exercise solutions, and things like mindfulness apps, Calm, which is one of the most popular apps you see on the App Store, etc., to really show how you can digitally, you can reach out, you can provide solutions to employees. But I think communication there is key, and it's great to see the conversation, the urgency and speed of the demand is being matched now at the C-suite level.
You partly answered a follow-up question I was going to ask you, Mark, about, you know, the trend in digital health services. It seems that there is a trend. It's a growing trend for companies to consider launching digital health services as opposed to the more traditional kind of employee assistance programs. But you kind of partly answered that with your various examples.
Yeah, and I think the hardest bit, and it's the same for us, is to knowing what's out there. It's a really crowded space at the moment. There's lots of things there. And it's a bit of a plug for our own company. How you guided through what's in the market, what's relevant, and what's right for you. And obviously EAP is something we always look at, and that's been there for a long time. And it's a great, what we would call a spine, a great backbone to a well-being solution for a company. But then what do you add on top of that? What would you layer in? What do your employees need? And there's so much out there now. It's hard sometimes to separate the wheat from the chaff, shall we say?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. Andrew, I haven't forgotten about you. I know we talked about fatigue earlier on. I'm curious to know what your observations have been about the impact of working from home on people. You know, not the pleasant part, the nice part of it, but you know, the longer term impacts of it.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I suppose just to follow on from a lot of what Gail and Mark have already said, I mean, the pandemic, I feel, has prompted organizations to re-examine their values, their goals, and their behaviors. It's thrown businesses into a lot of disarray, and like Gail was saying, the biggest challenges are how do we maintain that engagement? And it's not going to be that one size fits all. So that's, I think, the key, and that's where that's the angle I'll take on that. That, you know, it'll be different solutions with forward planning, controlling the controllables, and that's in a way to build a long-term strategy. Two key components, probably security or safety, job security, big part of it, and also, you know, a safety of returning to office as well, I think is huge, you know. Flexibility, as Gail touched off as well, I think is really important. Flexibility to adapt to a model that suits the individual, but also the organizational culture is key. Initially, we jumped overnight into survival mode. However, as we're now looking back at reboarding, I think the concern is that more ambiguity and uncertainty may be leading us down the road further into anxiety and stress, and even a fear of the normal, whatever that's going to look like. I mean, that's what I'm picking up. It's important also to remember that we all have different capacity to manage this transition. Different personality types can manage lifestyle and health stress changes, be more emotionally resilient and optimistic than others. We've seen a huge shift over the past year in the way we live and the way we work. You know, where lots of my friends, we're parenting from work now. I mean, that's just even a crazy phenomenon in itself. That's become a common stressor. As Gail was saying earlier, boundaries between home and work once were defined, but now they're really blurred. And our working hours have probably increased a little bit more. It's been a little bit more fluid with flexibility. There's definitely been benefits there. However, the flip side of that is, I think that taps into unease and uncertainty and can fuel anxiety, the amount of flexibility as well.
Andrew, what about the impact, as far as you can tell anyway, on managers and supervisors in organizations? I mean, I know that you guys provide a kind of a consultation support program just for the managers. What are you seeing there in terms of long-term impacts on them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with regards to the managers, one of the biggest challenges is fitting into that one-size-fits-all approach. They're having to have conversations with each different member of the team. Each employee's circumstances is unique, so it really requires an understanding, and how to filter that through the culture can be really difficult, and that's becoming a huge challenge for managers. A lot of managers would call in. I think it might have been Mark or Gail alluded to use the kind of facility of a manager assist line. We're seeing a big uptake on that, where we're supporting managers directly on that front. Also with trainings as well around resilience and that. But overall, with regards to the managers, there's a huge concern around anxiety. Again, I mean, anxiety is prevalent right through it. Anxiety has led the employees to working longer hours. Managers may be taking fewer sick days, all while becoming maybe less fulfilled in their work and their life. And it can be presenting that kind of presenteeism. And in a nutshell, whether working longer hours or working when sick, the ambiguity experienced can be detrimental to long-term employee well-being and burnout. So that's something that managers are trying to manage for employees, but also, I mean, let's not forget managers. They're experiencing all of this too, and they've got to try and manage that for themselves, you know, so they need to be managing their own awareness around these occurrences with the employees, but also themselves and the impact that these conversations are having upon them.
Andrew, thank you. I mean, that leads us on quite nicely into the next poll that we'd like to run. It'll be appearing on your screens shortly. And really, this is about your concerns about management teams and leadership teams generally. How concerned are organizations about them? Because I mean, we run the risk of forgetting about managers and supervisors, and in all our programs, just focusing largely on the employees or calling for support. So I think it's important to have some time to reflect on the managers and leaders themselves. So we'll just take a quick look at what the results are showing from this particular poll. 63% of the people here are concerned about the long-term impact on managers. That's interesting. I know we only have a few minutes before we open up the Q&A, but looking at the Q&A, the questions, we've got just a few questions there at the moment. So I'm just going to ask a couple of follow-up questions on this particular poll. Gail, just from your perspective, with your Nokia hat on, are the kind of needs of managers uppermost in the organization's mind, specifically managers and how they're dealing with it, this new virtual way of working? I know that it's not new to Nokia, but is there something that you think about?
Yeah, absolutely. In sort of maybe in multiple ways. So I think I mentioned earlier, we kicked off our mental health training series this year with workplace options, and actually those sessions started with a session specifically for line managers about why mental health awareness is important and the ability to recognize the signs of concerns and how to have a conversation with any employee that is in need of support. But also recognizing the fact that our managers are on the front line here. So I think they, along with HR, are generally the first people that employees turn to if they need to help. So to equip them with the knowledge and strategies to be able to manage these emotional aspects that people are going through, but also give them the support and guidance on self-care. So, if they're not in good shape mentally and physically, then they won't be in the right mindset to be able to support anyone else. And I think, Andrew, you mentioned the manager assist service via workplace options. That's something that we promote a lot to help managers deal with those more complex situations. And certainly, gosh, they've been having to deal with a lot of that over the last year. We use that analogy a lot about putting on your own oxygen mask first, and I think I've heard that a lot throughout the pandemic. But just ensuring, and we've created just simple guides and sort of short sessions so that managers are taking care of themselves to be able to give their best, but of course to stay well, and things like that. But I think one of the things that we've been talking a lot about as well is improving soft skills, or I prefer like human skills maybe. So I think a focus on development around perspective taking and empathy and self-awareness, these are the skills that will become even more important in a hybrid model. So that's it.
Mark, the results of the survey are interesting. 60% were concerned about managers. Do your clients ever focus on the needs of managers, or are they looking just generally holistically at the programs? Do 60% of them talk about their concerns about managers, or are they not really in that space yet?
Yeah, that's not my experience when we initially speak to clients about, they're not reaching out to us saying we want to talk to you around how we can support our managers. I have a couple of clients who perhaps forward thinking enough to do that. However, when we do bring that topic up, or until again suggest the manager assist part of the EAP is something they should look at, a sort of light bulb does go on, and they really do like it, and it's something they really sometimes haven't thought of, or they say yes, that's what we've been looking for, and that really helps to drive the decision making, I think. And when they take it away to discuss it, that's always forms part of the discussion, how we need to support management and leadership. Like you said, like Gail said, putting your oxygen mask on first. equipping leaders and managers to deal with these situations, their own personal health, as well as the health of their employees as well. And of course, you know, the insurers across the board have all got membership areas and apps and health and well-being stuff. So there's a broad concern and broad solutions based to look at mental health and well-being. But I think that manager assist part and specifically target them, that's something I think is unique to WPO.
Thanks, Mark. We've got a couple of questions that have come in, and I thought as it's 40 minutes to the hour, we ought to address some of these questions really, because we just keep talking. Let me see the first one. I'm gonna read it out. The first one says, what extra considerations are you giving over to lone working safety, to lonely working safety, people working on their own at home? I think it doesn't specify whether it's physical safety or any other form of safety issues. Gail, with 70,000 or so, 80,000 or so employees around the world, many will not have worked from home before and now are. Is safety, whether it's physical safety or health and safety, is that something that is uppermost that you guys are thinking about?
Well, interesting enough, as we sort of exploring this hybrid model in more detail, you know, it's discussions around, I think again, the flexibility of different people will need different things. So we understand that people, we've had to work from home over the last year, regardless of whether your home is a good place to work or not, and whether it's a safe place to work or not. You know, and I think that's something that, you know, we've tried to make sure that from a physical aspect, that the employees have what they need or can borrow equipment from the office, you know, if they need to sort of improve their setup from a sort of physical ergonomic perspective. But I think more and more that the conversations are going round about if you're you know, maybe new to the company and you're working from home and you're totally isolated, you live on your own, you know, that's been really tough. And now going forward, regardless of what the hybrid model looks like, that it's giving people the options that you know, you can come in and have a desk in the office, you know, if you feel you need to, so you can be with colleagues and you can see people. You know, we just want to make sure that people have the options open to them. But I think the sort of mental well-being of people has kind of been top of the agenda, certainly from what I get involved in, rather than the sort of safety aspect of the home.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Andrew, I think this one's for you. And if you can be brief, that would be great. The question was, in a virtual setting, how can you tell if an employee is struggling emotionally without giving us too much of the clinical sort of stuff? It is, I mean, I think from a manager's perspective, maybe not from a clinician's one, but a manager, how do they have those skills to spot people?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll keep it brief, Stephen. I mean, definitely there's the obvious one, and that's, I suppose, if you're having a meeting and someone continually has their camera off, that's probably something that is going to lead me to think maybe there's something there or not, or definitely worth exploring, you know, because they're not fully present if the camera is off, they're hiding in the background, maybe they're not, you know, maybe they're not in a good space. So that's something I would explore as well. From a more kind of preventative measure, I think, and this can be very challenging because of our tight schedules and that, but as a manager, I like to do a lot more check-ins, and I use that word check-in rather than check-up. I think that's really important. Initially, people are a little bit frightened when they see a message from me, 15-minute meeting. They think I want to get in to talk about the performance, but it's not. It's to get in there and have that open conversation about, you know, how are you doing? How are you managing? Being a little bit transparent about myself as well, you know, that some days are good, some days aren't, and if there's anything, let me know. So I think that kind of preventative thing, rather than can I spot it, can I not? It's about taking that journey and being committed as a manager from the start. Stay connected to your team. You know your team, and the same behavior is probably happening virtually as it would be in the office as well, you know. So to notice that, is that, will I keep going, or is that enough, Stephen, for you?
That's fine.
Yeah,
You've triggered another question in relation to this.
okay.
There's a couple of other questions, but I think what you've triggered in me is a question about skill. And Mark, you can address it if you want to, or Gail, but I'm just wondering, it is a skillful thing to be able to observe and notice an employee of yours, or if you're a supervisor or manager. I'm just wondering whether there's a recognition out there within corporations, organizations generally, that they're going to have to put some effort into developing skills that managers may not have. I mean, in the old days, in the 80s and 90s, we talked about soft skills, but actually now more than ever, probably we need better human skills to be able to manage people. And I'm just wondering, is manager development or skill development or training something that your clients ever talk about, Mark?
Not specifically in that respect. They talk to me about that, but in my own personal experience at a large corporate entity, it's something that has been addressed before. But I think this just throws even more light on it and how important it is. I really like what Andrew said about checking in and not checking up on people. I think that's really important, because you used to be able to catch someone in the corridor, at the coffee machine, how's it getting on? You can probably pick up on a few things there. Unless you book something in now or physically make the action to call someone in this sort of hybrid environment, you can go for days, if you wanted to, weeks, without having any sort of serious conversation or serious interaction with someone who's in your team or a colleague. And I think that can be quite dangerous, where you start to fragment as a team, or even, like you say, you don't pick up on things that are issues. So I think it comes back again to good leaders, in my experience, always were the ones who were the most empathetic, who had good emotional intelligence, who could pick up on what their team was feeling and how, and they could really get those almost non-verbal cues sometimes, because when you usually say, how are you doing? I'm fine is the usual response. But as Andrew said, there's ways you can realize that they're not fine. That's harder and harder to do in a virtual environment. In the office, you can pick it up pretty quickly. So there's going to need to be more interaction to that, or focus on that.
We're going to finish on this subject, I think, because it's quite an interesting one. Gail, a couple of weeks ago, somebody sent me a link to a YouTube video, and it was I think it was a spoofy link, but it featured a manager calling up one of his team members, and the first thing the manager says is, "This is a mental health check," and I'm thinking, well, that's the complete opposite of what Mark was talking about. And I was referencing kind of the soft human skills. From your organizational perspective, has the pandemic and everything else that's happened as a result of it, has that in some kind of way led the organization to rethink how managers are trained, how managers are developed in terms of the people skills, their ability to identify employees who may be at risk or who may be emotionally vulnerable? Has there been any focus on this?
Yeah, and I think actually last year, because everybody was in the same situation, so we had our cameras on, we could see in people's homes what was going on. It kind of put everybody on a sort of almost level playing field to some extent, but it was much more personal. So I think those actually foundations were laid last year already, and now obviously we have leadership and line manager development ongoing, but I think to your point that there's more about, so we talk a lot about psychological safety, so I know that from being able to sort of go, oh, I've made a mistake, but also more recently we've announced from a culture perspective what we call the Nokia Essentials, so open, fearless and empowered. And so we're at the minute, a lot of that work in terms of sort of development around those is bringing those essentials to life. So the whole well-being and mental health topic fits in really nicely into people feeling that they can openly share that I'm not doing so good today, or I need a bit of help, and feeling fearless around that, but also the empowerment around sort of taking control of your own well-being. But yeah, absolutely. I think it's more embedded in our ways of working. So so we don't have it out here as a separate thing, but
Yes,
it's embedded
yeah.
in how we do, and you start to role model those behaviours. And we've got some plans to do storytelling around this area more and more, and I think that's when people can engage with it much better, you know, in that area.
And in fact, it goes back to an earlier point we were discussing on the skill or the future skill set of managers and what they need to be doing more of and learning to be able to manage a larger number of people working from home. Probably the final question, Andrew, the sort of issues that managers call up to discuss. Are you seeing managers wanting support in how to better understand their team, a particular individual? Are they using this consultation service that EAPs normally provide to guide them or coach them in how they speak to troubled employees?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely been a huge uptake on the manager assist line. I mean, it's a great support, and every manager has their own challenges, you know. Myself, I'd have my own challenges, and to have a line that I can ring 24/7 to get some support, and it's that gap, it bridges that gap between, say, what HR and policy says that we should do. So while we know this is what we should do, the manager assist line kind of is nearly like a coaching line that can support them in, right, well, they're the parameters. That's what you got to do. So let's see what works for you in delivering that information, or how can you approach that? And I think it's really collaborative, and it's offered a great support to many managers, and a lot don't know about it, but those that do are certainly using it, you know, for you know, trying to deal with performance issues, confrontation, you know, simply, you know, the message we should have at the minute in this pandemic and what we're all going through is that it should be people over performance. Yes, there's a performance element, but it should always be people over performance. And that's what we kind of try to connect it relationally, policies, procedure, HR protocol, but this is how maybe you can approach this. And you know, they can give it a go one day, and then you get someone else you get them calling back the next day. It didn't quite work, and we can tweak it a little bit. So I find that it's been a really good support to managers, and that's the feedback that myself and the team would be getting. That it's probably been one of the biggest assets that we have been able to provide, actually, I think.
I believe we have been seeing a much greater uptake in this manager consultation and manager support service, and I think we're all delighted to see that, because we always thought it was one of those very little used element of EAP programs around the world virtually, and it's good to see that, because it is more and more about supporting. It should be more about supporting leadership during this very difficult time, and you know, the post-pandemic period, whenever that happens, with all of the changes that are coming with hybrid working, I think management, leaders, supervisors are going to need more and more support. So I think we're all very hopeful that our own clients, WPO's clients, will focus a little bit more on how we publicize and promote that kind of leadership support, that kind of manager support program, because I think it provides a great benefit to all. I'm looking at the clock as timekeeper extraordinaire, and I can see that it's almost of the hour. So I'm gonna just close this off firstly by thanking the three of you for your insights and for answering the questions, and for not allowing us to run over time. It's been very good. I'm very pleased with all that, but I'm also very, very grateful to you for sharing your valuable time with us. And also hoping that, of course, that if our attendees have to take one little gem from the last hour, then will be equally happy with that as well. So thank you all very much for attending, and the three panelists for participating, and have a great day. Thanks all. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.